My name is Emily Hinshaw, and I'm an intern at Williamsburg Presbyterian Church. Thank you for joining me today for 5 Minutes of Faith. So in addition to being an intern, I'm also a student. I study geology, and I love the study of rocks and the study of the earth. And I want to talk to you today about faith and science because they definitely go hand in hand in my life. But it's something that we don't often talk about a lot as a church community as to how these two things work together. And we could definitely talk about it a lot more. So, rocks. Today I want to talk about the strength of rocks specifically. Because a lot of times in church we'll compare God to a rock. We'll say God is our rock. People will pray, "Oh Lord, our rock and our redeemer." You hear that before a lot of sermons, I'm guessing. I know I do. And so what do we mean? Well, I think what we're trying to say is that God is really strong, God is sturdy and solid. And I think that's great, and I agree. I love to think of God as something strong and sturdy and solid and something I can depend on and something that's going to be there for me. But that metaphor is deepened when you understand a little bit more about the strength of rocks. So when you think about rocks, you may know that there are 3 main types. You could say them with me. I'm sure you learned in elementary school. There's sedimentary, metamorphic, and igneous. So sedimentary rocks, largely speaking, are probably pretty weak or weaker. Metamorphic rocks are sort of middle of the road. It depends on what type of metamorphic rock you have, but some are pretty weak and some are very, very strong. And then igneous rocks are usually very strong, very physically tough. They have minerals that are interlocked together, kind of like my fingers here. So it's very hard to break it apart. Now, when a rock undergoes a lot of pressure, it will respond in one of 2 ways. And these are 2 types of what we call deformation. And if you break that word down, deformation, it basically just means it's changing shape somehow. It's changing the way that it looks. And so these 2 types of deformation can be illustrated with things you may have lying around your house. The first one is brittle deformation. And my example there would be like a pretzel. If you were to snap a pretzel in half and you break it, that's kind of like brittle deformation. It's just when you crack the rock, when the rock fractures under pressure. Now the other type of deformation is ductile deformation, and that could be illustrated with a piece of Play-Doh or something like Play-Doh, where you may stretch it apart and it doesn't snap immediately, but instead the Play-Doh, it thins out and it goes into all these wonky, weird shapes. So that ductile deformation is something I think is really, really interesting. So think about a granite, for example. That's a pretty common rock. You've probably heard of it. You've probably seen it in a kitchen countertop. You've probably seen it on a hike. Granite is very strong, and I have some lying around with me here at my house. So here's my granite. You can take a look here. You can see that those grains are locked in together, kind of like I was just talking about, like this. But then if I take this same rock, promise it's the same rock, and you flip it around like this, you can see there's this little pattern following my finger, this horizontal pattern. And then it's on this side too, and then you can see that pattern again. So this pattern tells me that this rock did undergo some pressure, kind of like that pretzel that you were snapping with your fingers. But instead of breaking this rock, probably for a number of important reasons, but it didn't break. It instead just changed shape. It just looked a little bit different. It didn't snap in half. And I think that that's a really beautiful metaphor for how we understand what it means to call God our rock. So God is this sturdy, strong force and presence in our life, but sometimes our faith is tested and we have doubts, we have questions, and God may look a little bit different on the other side of those questions. But that rock is still there and is still very strong on either side. So something I challenge you to think about this week is a time when your faith was tested, and how did your relationship with God, or how you thought about God, how did it look different? But the other thing I really want to challenge you to do is think about your faith and what you know about the scientific world. How do these things work together, and how can you see them being connected? So thank you so much.